Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions, the ones you've left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos, or have sent to me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. This is episode number 43 now. Oh my goodness, I've been doing a lot of these. Got some good questions this week, so let's just get right to it. Roxanne Nelson. Are there any other cults that are under the same scrutiny as Scientology? Who or what decides that a person is ready to go on to the next step on the bridge? Thanks for the questions, Roxanne. I'm not really sure I understand your first question because, yeah, there's a lot of cults that are under a lot of scrutiny. So Scientology is kind of big in the media because Tom Cruise and John Travolta and other celebrities are connected with it, and it's had a lot of high-profile media lately. But, yeah, there's other cults that are under a lot of scrutiny. As far as this second question that you asked, though, as to who decides, who moves, when the person moves on in Scientology, this is kind of interesting, and I want to explain this whole thing because I've never really gotten into it before. In the Church of Scientology, a person will come in and they will get counseling or auditing, right? And they move up this bridge to total freedom, this chart with all these services on it, and there's all these different levels. And the way that this works is, I thought you guys might find this interesting. When a person goes in for auditing, there's another person, there's a third person. You have the auditor and you have the pre-clearer, the person who's getting the auditing, right? But there's a third person, and this person is called the case supervisor. And the way this works is, the case supervisor is like the quarterback on the case. He's the guy who's in an ivory tower, who's in a room that is not, he's not ever talking to the pre-clear. He's not ever having conversations with the guy. In fact, he doesn't even want to. He doesn't want to talk to the guy. He doesn't want to, generally speaking, it's best if he doesn't even know him. The auditor takes the pre-clear in for sessions or for interviews where questions will be asked of the person to determine what kind of auditing to do or whether auditing needs to be repaired or fixed or something like that. So these interviews get done and then the actual auditing gets done. All of this stuff is written down, right? All of the answers that the pre-clear gives to the questions that are asked of him are written down in a shorthand sort of form on worksheets. Those worksheets for every single interview or session go into a folder. That folder is what goes back and is what goes to the case supervisor. So the case supervisor sits in a room and gets folders all day long of all the different people who are being audited by that organization. He opens the folder, and inside the folder there's all kinds of stuff, and I won't get into everything that's in a folder because there's a lot in there. It's not just the worksheets of the interviews, but there's also forms that lay out step by step what this person is going to be audited on. That's called a program. The program is written by the case supervisor. The overall master program for every single person who comes into Scientology is this thing that Hubbard wrote called the grade chart, or the bridge to total freedom. And I'll show a graphic of it online, in the video here so you can see what I'm talking about. That is all the steps that a person needs to go through in order to get all the way up to clear and OT, or operating thetan. But those steps consist of, if those are the broad actions, then the case supervisor is the one who works on the minutia, the step by step by step that Joe Public needs to do in order to move up this bridge, because there's hundreds and hundreds of different processes and actions that get done on a person as they go through all these steps. And if they run into trouble along the way, the case supervisor is the one who directs what to do to fix the trouble. And the case supervisor is somebody who's already trained as an auditor, and then Hubbard wrote a whole bunch of other issues on how to do this case supervision and how to be a supervisor for somebody's case. So that's kind of the system. So if a guy shows up and he's going to get auditing, he pays for a chunk of hours of auditing, and he says, I want to go up this bridge. So the auditor says, great, and they do an interview and they find out all about his life and what's going on and that sort of thing. And then that goes to the case supervisor, who writes out a program of what to do, what actual processes to run on the pre-clear in order to move him along, right? Based on what's going on in his life and what the grade chart, the bridge, actually says to do, right? He's the one who is making these determinations. Now, let's say that the guy is progressing well and he is on what's called grade 0, which is a series of processes that are run. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours to do, to get, and they all have to do with the subject of communication. That's what grade 0 covers, is communication. So there might be processes like, recall a time that you had a hard time communicating with somebody, right? And the guy recalls it, and then they do stuff with that. I mean, there's all kinds of different processes, right? The guy does all these processes, or he does a lot of the processes, and let's say at some point along the line, the pre-clear is in the session with the auditor, and he says, oh my God, I feel great about communication now. I feel so wonderful. I can communicate with anybody ever about anything, right? Well, that happens to be the end result of what that grade 0 is trying to accomplish, is the person saying that. So when he says it, right, then, and there's other things that they look at, but I'm not going to get all weird and technical about this because it's all just, Scientology Faldy-roll. But when what looks like the end result of what they're doing is reached, the folder goes back to the case supervisor with all the information, and he's the one who says, good, he's done with grade 0 now, and give him a pass on it. And then the guy goes and he does a little formal process called a testing, where he goes and he sees another person called an examiner, and they put him on the meter, and he says, yes, I'm done with grade 0, and the examiner makes sure that he's done. And then that little process is done, and then the folder goes back to the case supervisor, who says, good, everything's great, now you get to move on with grade 1, because that's the one that comes after grade 0, right? And that addresses problems. So now he's going to start a whole nother grade with a whole new set of processes that are going to talk about and address problems, right? He's all done with communication now. And that's how you move through each of the levels of Scientology up to clear. And then the guy goes clear, right? And he's, I'm clear, it's all great, I don't have a reactive mind anymore. And then you proceed on the OT levels. And even on the OT levels, you're auditing yourself. So, 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8 are solo. You're auditing yourself. And OT 4 and 5 are done with an auditor. Regardless of that, you're still keeping worksheets. Even when you're auditing yourself, you're holding the cans and you're doing the meter and you're running the session, you're the one keeping worksheets. Those worksheets go into a folder. That folder goes to a case supervisor, and the case supervisor is the one who's telling you what to do in every one of your sessions. So there's always a case supervisor, always. And even when a person is doing the purification rundown, there's a case supervisor, right? When a person's sweating out in the sauna every day, he goes and he fills out a report of what happened, what he felt like in the sauna, how he felt, what he experienced, did anything mental happen to him while he was in the sauna sweating. All that gets put into a worksheet. That goes into the folder goes to the case supervisor. It comes back from the case supervisor saying, okay, let's bump up his vitamins, bump up the niacin, and get him through the purification rundown. So every auditing action that happens on a person in Scientology is supervised by a case supervisor. And that's who determines how a person runs and when they're done with each of the actions as a person moves up the line. So I thought that might be of interest to explain that whole thing, since I've never talked about that before, and it's a good question. Jesus Christ. Dude, stop. Dude, please elaborate as much as you possibly can on the no deaths in Clearwater policy. That a California death is more ideal fascinates me. After you mention that, suddenly it's the only thing I want to know about. Hoping there's a great number of anecdotes on that. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I have a lot of anecdotes on this, but here's what I can tell you. Clearwater, Florida, is the home of the Flag Service Organization. The Flag Service Organization is the highest level church of Scientology on the planet. There is only one. It is the Mecca. It's a class 12 organization, okay? In the system of organizations, the local churches like Denver and Pasadena and Twin Cities and Milano and those churches, the city churches, are called class 5 orgs, okay? And then there are two levels. There's another higher level, like in Los Angeles and in England, there's these St. Hill organizations, and those are class 6 organizations. And then you have the advanced organizations, and those are class 8 organizations. And then you have FLAG, which is the class 12. Now, the reason I'm laying all this out is there's only one, and that organization is the highest producing moneymaker for Scientology. Clearwater, Florida is the money place for Scientology. They charge the most for services, right? When you go to FLAG to do services, you're going to pay more for the same level of service that you would pay at a local church. If you're coming from Pasadena and you want to do a course in Pasadena, it's going to cost you $500. That same course at FLAG will cost you like $1,500 or $2,000. And if you want to pay for auditing in Pasadena, you'll pay, $4,000 for 12 and a half hours of auditing. At FLAG, you'll pay $7,000 or $8,000 for that same kind of auditing, okay? Because it's the best. It's the best level of auditing you can get, even though in theory all the churches are supposed to deliver the same, Big Mac. The Big Mac at FLAG is so much better that you're paying more for it, okay? So because it's the central place where money is made, I mean, the gross income of FLAG is on the order of $1 million or something a week, maybe more. I mean, they're making a lot of money at that place. So when something happens that threatens the income of FLAG, that's a big deal to Scientology. And so like when Lisa McPherson died in the mid to late 90s in Clearwater, that was not just a huge legal situation for the church, and it was also, I think, the closest David Miscavige has ever come to going to jail. But because if you get all the facts on the thing, he actually had some culpability in that. But it directly affected the income of FLAG. Now, I'm talking about this in monetary terms because we can talk about, how they want to keep things calm in Clearwater and the theta and the N theta and all that stuff. But let's keep in mind that Scientology is a money-making scam. So if anything threatens that income, that's something that Scientology is going to do something about. Scientology does not make lots and lots and lots of money out of Los Angeles. It makes a lot, but it doesn't make lots and lots and lots. It makes lots and lots and lots out of Clearwater, okay? It is the money place. No other location in Scientology produces as much money as FLAG does. I think if you combined the income from Los Angeles and from England and from Copenhagen and from Sydney, which is where the other Sea Org bases are, right? I think when you add all that up, you get probably comparable to what FLAG is making, right, in a week, maybe. I haven't seen all those numbers from all those places, so I can't, I'm only, spitballing here. But it's not as big of a deal. Okay, now I talk about all that so that you'll get the idea that you don't want to threaten what's going down at FLAG. So if you have when Lisa McPherson died and when things that create problems at FLAG, they'll create problems at the other places too. I mean, if Lisa McPherson had died in LA, that would have been a big deal too. But it wouldn't have been as big of an income threat, if that makes sense, right? So they don't want anything messing with FLAG. Like, they don't want an ounce of trouble in that place. So anything that Scientology thinks will be trouble or could be trouble or could possibly result in some ounce of trouble somehow that gets shipped somewhere else, which is usually Los Angeles or England or something, or Australia. But they'll ship it somewhere else so that it doesn't get in the way of flag, okay? And that means like when Sea Org members get old and it looks like they're, going to go in their last years and that sort of thing, they get sent away from flag. If somebody has an illness or terminal illness or something, they can't even be around flag, right? They get sent somewhere else. That's why, is because of the income threat. So that's as far as anecdotes, I don't know. I could talk about old people and suicides and all this kind of stuff, but I think I've kind of answered the point of the question. Matt Kordelsky. Here's a question I know you don't know the actual answer to, but I want to hear your opinion about. In the last week, the internet news was filled with reports that Tom Cruise was contemplating leaving Scientology. You were quoted as saying you doubted it, he'd be disconnected from his family, and anyone following the story of Scientology knows he would lose his apostlehood to the Messiah Miscavige. Not long after that story came, the announcement of Scientology's own CNN, an all-Scientology news channel. My gut feeling was that there was a closed-door chat between Cruise and Miscavige about how to react to HBO's Going Clear and the news reports about Cruise picking his daughter over Scientology. As crazy as Miscavige is said to be, I think he'd do anything to keep his golden egg-laying goose, Cruise, from leaving. The church has been alleged for many years of asking parishioners to donate money to apparently bogus projects, building church buildings they knew would remain empty, and asking for money to modify the former Los Angeles PBS studios to spread the good news of Scientology, even though they had the elaborate Golden Era studios for many years already. Do you think that the Scientology CNN story is Miscavige's reaction to Going Clear? Do you think that Cruise said to Miscavige, why don't we use those PBS studios we bought to counter HBO's bad PR? Will we ever get to see this Scientology CNN channel, or is this just more smoke and mirrors? Will this Scientology CNN be a laugh fest like most of Scientology's internal videos that have leaked out, or will they take it seriously? Well, you're right. I don't know the actual answer to the question, but I have kind of addressed this before in that I don't think that those, the renovated PBS studios, which are now called Scientology Media Productions, I don't think that's going to open for a very long time. I think that's going to be a fundraising cow for Miscavige, just like the Superpower building in Florida was, right? The big Mecca building that they opened. That thing took like 25 years to open, and millions and millions and millions. I think they raised like $116 million or something for that building overall by the time everything was said and done. And I guarantee you they didn't spend $116 million on that building. You've never seen penny pinching like you have when you get into the finances of Scientology. They are very, 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 very frugal when it comes to spending money, but they certainly don't have a problem sucking money up. So I don't see any reason to think that the renovated PBS studios in Los Angeles are any different than what was going down in Florida with the Superpower building. That's what I think. And I think that if they do ever get around to opening it, and I could be wrong about that, maybe next year, maybe this year, they'll actually open it up. I mean, they were telling their parishioners last June that they were going to open by June, right? They were telling them that last June was the first target date to open. Well, it's now coming up on February, and or it is February, and there's no Scientology Media Productions opened, right? Not even close. And no word of them opening, and it's just going to go on and on and on. As far as Cruise and Miscavige having backdoor chats about how to deal with Going Clear and that sort of thing, I don't know what to say about that. I really don't even want to comment on it because I'm not privy to their conversations, and I don't know. I really don't want to presume to think that I do know. Do I think they had a conversation about Going Clear and a reaction to it? I kind of think not, actually. I don't think that Tom Cruise advises David Miscavige on what to do. And I don't think they have strategy meetings. I think they meet up and do whatever they do. And I think that Cruise listens to Miscavige when it comes to what Scientology is going to do. And, Scientology's response to Going Clear was to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times and lambaste Alex Gibney with websites and Lawrence Wright and just do their usual OSA nonsense, right? So I don't think they had they probably had a few freak out sessions for sure over the whole thing. But I don't know how involved Cruz was, because he's been, kind of being very quiet about his involvement in Scientology over the last many years. And he's been doing that for a good reason. It's really his only way out of the accusations and the exposés and stuff on what he's been up to in Scientology, is to just keep his damn mouth shut. Because then, all his loving, adoring fans can sort of pretend to ignore the accusations and the truth about him. And he can go on raking in millions for, Paramount and Hollywood and any other studio that he's working for. And everybody in his world has made it clear to him that he needs to shut the hell up about Scientology and stay shut the hell up about it. And he's been a good boy about that, and he's been following those instructions. So I don't, are they going to open a news studio for Scientology? Well, if they do, I'll be very surprised. And if they do, it'll be a total joke. I mean, total joke. I mean, give me a break. These guys don't know the first thing about how to actually do real media or positive media. And their brand is so toxic that it is beyond repair. I mean, there is no repairing Scientology's brand at this point. It's dead. And I think, like I said, about a year ago or something, they're dead and they don't know it yet. And that's actually what's going on with Scientology. Mr. Bizzini, I am fascinated by the constant barrage of flyers for minor events that the Church of Scientology hold at various orgs, with the never-ending quotes like epic, world-changing, extravaganza event, etc., that so often now include the bait of some free food. Surely, just like spam email, many public members just ignore this constant pleading to come to yet another regging. So my question is this. They set out a room in the org, they make it epic, but nobody turns up. How do they explain this away? It must, after a while, border on utter humiliation that nobody turns up to their epic event. Are they compelled to hold these events, or do they have no clue how to try another tact? Surely one can only smash one's face into a brick wall so many times before one realizes that using face and wall interaction is not the correct way to take a wall down. Scientology events are all Miscavige's brainchild, and they have been going on for years because he wants them to go on. And they're going to keep going on for as long as he says that they're going to go on. And Miscavige is not somebody who learns from his mistakes. So the whole face wall thing is actually going to keep going on because he truly is somebody who doesn't, it's his way, and this is how it's going to be, right? And he only gets, of course, the glowing reports of how wonderful all the events are. And he doesn't, nobody's going to dare tell him that these things are just a disaster and hell on wheels to put on and all that sort of thing. And it's not like he doesn't know, but he doesn't care. It's all about his aggrandizement anyway. So that whole dog and pony show of these events and whatnot, they're going to keep going on for as long as he's in charge. And that's just how that is. And the staff just deal with it. Now, I can tell you that at a local level, they get very frustrated about the lack of attendance and people not being involved and that sort of thing. And the staff tend to get into a frame of mind of a blame the public sort of idea. I said before, a couple weeks ago, that there's this caste system in Scientology where you have the Sea Org, staff, and then the public. And there's a better than attitude at each level, right? So the staff think they're better than the public, the Sea Org think they're better than, the staff and the public, etc. So the public get a pretty dim view of, the staff get a pretty dim view of public who don't participate, because the staff, of course, are very dedicated and they're working very hard to try to make a go of Scientology, and they're really caught, in an unwinnable situation. But they're trying, and they do get very disheartened about, the lack of participation and that sort of thing. And they tend to talk about it in terms of how out ethics the public are, right? How dilettante they are. And this sort of opens up the idea of dilettantism in Scientology. So let me explain that real fast. Hubbard wrote a policy letter where he said that dilettantes are people who are only engaged in something as a pastime, as a passive activity. They're not really serious about it. You know, an old lady's knitting circle or sewing circle, he says, you know. Scientologists who, you know, can't do Scientology because they have to go bowling or go to the horse races or something. These are actually examples that he gave. Are not really worth very much as Scientologists. And he said that if that's going on, and that is what Scientology is in your area, then you've got some suppressive person in the organization who's holding down the show, and he's actually keeping Scientology from expanding. Because it's just ethics, they're just out ethics, right? Because of course, anybody who was with the program would be doing Scientology full-time all the time, right? And they'd be with the program, and they'd be gung-ho, and they'd be having at it, right? And that sort of thing. And the staff feel that that's them, and the public are dilettantes. And so that's just another label that Scientology uses to castigate its members and make them feel bad about themselves because they're not doing enough or giving enough or aren't generous enough and all that sort of thing. So that's sort of where and it's thought stopping. Because the staff go, oh, well, he's just a dilettante, you know, and they write the guy off. And then, you know, they do that, and they do that, and they do that, and then they sit there and they wonder, well, there's nobody here, and I'm failing, and the org is failing, and it's all failing, and this really sucks. And then after their contract is up, they leave staff. They go, this is bullshit, I'm done with this, and then they go. And that's sort of the cycle of being a staff member, that's kind of how it goes for them. And they have an easier time of leaving because their contract is only 2.5 years or 5 years. So once it's done, they're done, and they leave. And they don't have to be on staff anymore, unlike the Sea Org, who signed the billion-year lifetime commitment, and they can't leave. And so they experience that, but they just keep going, you know. And we've, you know, obviously that situation with the Sea Org is a whole different thing. But the dilettante label and whatnot, and the thought stopping that goes on with those labels, very much exists at the level of the Sea organization as well. So that's kind of what goes on with that. It's time for Flash Answers. Barbara Miller. Chris, do you think, as I do, that when this magical world of David's comes crashing down, he will slip out the back door with all the money and live happily ever after, leaving everyone else to face the consequences? You know, I get asked this question all the time, and I just don't know. I think given the opportunity, David Miscavige would run out the back door rather than face any consequences. So, you know, sure. Want to know about. Hi Chris, thanks for these Q&A videos. I have heard a lot about the lives of the high-level Scientologists and those that work in the Sea Org. I've been wondering about the lives of ordinary Scientologists. How does Scientology influence the normal member's life? Do average Scientologists, for example, have non-Scientologist friends? Yeah, sure, of course they do. They're living life in the real world, and they have to have relationships with, you know, people who aren't involved in Scientology and that sort of thing. They have family members who aren't Scientologists. And, you know, your average Scientology public person lives a pretty normal life. They have a job, they go to work, they have kids, they have a car, they got bills, you know, all that sort of thing. Their life is influenced by Scientology in that they are being told all the time that they need to be more dedicated to Scientology, and they need to give more money to Scientology, and they need to do Scientology, they need to make Scientology a priority in their life. And so, you know, to the degree that they believe that and fall into that, they spend most of their time or a lot of their time involved in Scientology. Not all public Scientologists do that. Some public Scientologists only get involved with it for a few hours a week, you know, and they take breaks between their courses and that sort of thing. I mean, you know, it's varied with people, you know, with individuals. It's kind of as various as individuals are. Some public Scientologists get really into it, and they get really into the lifestyle and really into being down at the church all the time and that sort of thing. So, you know, it varies. Joni Lahtinen. Do you think there is a threat of Scientology's wrath for us never-ends, curious and critical towards the Scientology topic, who participate in the online events and or follow great SP critics like yourself, Rinder, Ortega, and others? Or is their reach a thing of the past, their actions now only reserved for the big SPs themselves and not the random people they interact with? Scientology's never really gone after, random people who interact with SPs. That's not really, they don't really have major resources for that sort of thing. If you're directly attacking Scientology and you're making a stand against them and you're a thorn in their side, they'll come after you. And if you're not, then they won't. And that's kind of how it works. And they don't have anywhere near the resources to go after every single person who makes a comment or says something critical about Scientology, right? They just don't, they're not that big and they're not that powerful. They just like to, make themselves look that way. I've had some very funny questions and comments being directed my way about, I'm afraid to comment on your video because they might come after me, and I'm just like, okay, it's taking it a little bit too far. They're not that powerful. Kath T. I hear people saying that the Church of Scientology is going to die. With billions in money and assets, isn't that a total fantasy? Someone will step in the moment Miscavige shows any weakness. What do you say to that? I say that you're probably right. I don't know what's going to happen when Miscavige is out of the picture. I sort of have an idea that it will sort of, internalize and collapse because I think he's sort of holding it all together. And I mean that administratively and with the finances and the bank accounts and whatnot. But, he could be like Rutherford in the Jehovah's Witnesses, and he could end up dying or leaving or whatever, and a council of people move in and somehow figure out how to take over and continue running the show of organized Scientology somehow. Or there could be some other influence that hits the lines that we don't even know about right now or is just, gearing up. So we'll see what ends up happening with this. But with billions in the bank and all the assets Scientology has, it's definitely here to stay for a while. And my effort is not to collapse it because that's a bit hard to imagine, but really just make it so inconsequential that it just sort of fades away. And that would be a job well done as far as I'm concerned, because if we just close off their new membership at this point, I'd be happy. Because people really need to get a clue and not go anywhere near that stuff, because it's just toxic for their lives and for their relationships and their pocketbook. Okay, and so we've come to the end of another episode of Critical Q&A. Thank you very much for coming around and listening to all the things that I've had to say. If you haven't bought my book, buy it, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.